So hello and great to meet you all. There's been an incredible response to this lecture series, and which is, I think, a testament to these great and complex times, needs of our times, and our great need for action. Uh, Perhaps more resounding as a need for something different, something bold, something hopeful and playful and joyful even. So when we're calling in the clowns to make sense of the world, either the world has turned upside down or we're speaking to the true purpose, or a true and profound purpose of clowns. So here we are. Thank you for coming. I am Robyn Hambrook. I am now going to share a screen. Here, you signed up for this, the Activist Clown Toolkit, a Trickster's Guide to Playful Rebellion, and many other titles. So yes, here we are. This is I am an activist clown. My name's Robyn Hambrook. I'm a Bristol-based director, theatre, performer, teacher. But over the past 20 years, I've been a passionate practitioner of clowning, of physical theatre, circus, and street art. And in the last 7 years, I've been exploring the meeting point of clowning and politics, alongside a deep desire I've had to address the injustices in the world. I'm a founder of the Bristol Clown School, co-founder of the Online Clown Academy, and I undertake continuing research at this intersection of clowning and activism, which happens sometimes online, sometimes in the real world, with international collaborators in workshop spaces, research labs, and in the streets. And I also create collaborative research spaces to test and push the limits of clowning, to create new knowledge and methodologies, and to strengthen partnerships. So the intersection of art and activism is a really dynamic and engaging one, but it is also divisive. Creative protest can entertain and inspire, but does it risk diluting its own message? Does turning serious crises into art make them feel less urgent? And some would argue yes. Yet, in a world of fractured media, bias, and toxic social networks, one that's teetering on the edge of multiple catastrophes, how should we respond? There's a tension between direct action and creative protest, and mass civil disobedience remains one of the most powerful tools for change. But artistic resistance offers something different. Subversion through humor, through symbolism, and unexpected disruption. Which brings us to clowns. At first glance, clowning seems like the least serious form of protest, but this series will show you that clowns have long operated near circles of power, using satire, absurdity, and disguise as weapons. And in these times of chaos, maybe the real question isn't whether to send in the clowns, but why haven't we done so already? So yes, this is a four-part series that takes us from roots to action. Today's session is about tricksters and truth tellers. It's a history of disruption. So we're going to look at the history of political clowning to give us a context and a basis for this work. Week 2, I share some of my tactics of the activist clown. Week 3, I've been working with meeting lots of clowns out in the front lines. So I have some case studies of their work. And week 4, we meet your activist clown, the small steps for your big-hearted journeys. So let's start with some definitions. So this is one for the chat box, for all of you out there. When I say clowns or clowning, what do you think of? What first comes to mind when you hear the word clown? But what does this tell us about what the clown is or does? So yeah, you've already mentioned we can't simplify or distinguish clowns simply by the way they look, by makeup, ill-fitting clothes, wigs, and the red nose, although those are popular culture. That's often where we've seen clowns on TV, film, stage, circuses, and the streets. But they have long since left the stage and spilled out into many different environments. We find clowns on the edges as part of countercultures, subverting societal norms, breaking the fourth wall, breaking conventions of theatres and circus spaces. They are found amongst the audience. They are boundary crossers, shifting the balances of power. These days, you can find clowns in hospitals, offering comfort and release to poorly children and their families. You can find them in areas of recovery and war, of natural disaster, offering hope and healing through laughter and play. You can find them in dementia care settings, offering connection, and you can also find them in the streets, protesting. But maybe if we think about what the clown does, we find ourselves in more interesting territory. How does a clown behave? What is their logic? We've already said that they are rule breakers, transgressors, that they play, invert, get things wrong. They display absurd behaviors. They are also truth tellers. They mock and parody. Clowns can subvert authority. They can challenge oppressive systems and highlight the contradictions and the absurdities of society. It's also important to think about who is watching, thinking about the audience and how they're affected. We've already said, people have already mentioned laughter, but clowns also invite compassion and connection. They can scare us. They can challenge us. They can invite curiosity and play and participation, an invitation to be part of the play. The clowns can create moments of disruption, surprise, and reflection, encouraging us to stop and to question the status quo and imagine alternative possibilities. So, what's a clown's function then? This quote from David Bridell and Ezra LeBancs sums it up nicely and succinctly, so I won't even try. Let's go to this. The clown's function has been fairly consistent: to turn established norms on their heads, to provoke new understandings and appreciation of the human condition, a celebration of our foibles and a mockery of power. And by examining ourselves from nonsensical perspectives, the clowns give us vital permission to laugh at ourselves and our beliefs. So historically, I'll let that little sit with us for a moment. I think that's such a brilliant quote. Permission to laugh at ourselves and our beliefs. And David Bridell runs the LA Clown School, if anyone, and has written some brilliant books on clowning. So historically, clowns have been with us from the beginning. As long as we've been performing, clowns have been present amongst indigenous communities, in ancient religious ceremonies, and part of the far-reaching entertainment industry. We have some accounts of clowns amongst indigenous communities in the American Northwest. And this, I will just read a little excerpt from Daughters of Copper Women by Anne Cameron. It's a book which contains a wonderful retelling of myths and history through the voices of elderly First Nation women. Many are told through the voice of Granny, a stand-in for the old women who share their stories with Cameron. Here goes, here's my reading. A clown is like a newspaper or magazine, or one of those people who write an article to tell you a book or a movie is worth bothering with. They make comment on everything, every day, all the time. If a clown thought that the tribal council was getting to do was really foolish, why the clown would just show up at the council and imitate every move every one of those leaders made. Only the clown would imitate it in such a way, every little wart that person would show, every hole in their idea would suddenly look real big. It was like if you were vain about your clothes, the clown would be there walking right behind you, all decked out in the most god-awful mess of stuff, but all of it looking somehow like you were wearing. Or if you thought every word you spoke was gospel, the clown would just stroll along behind you, babbling away like a simple mind or a baby. Every up and down of your voice, the clown's voice would go up and down until you finally heard what an ass you were being. One particular story Granny tells is about a famous clown, a woman who had been a clown her whole life. The Christians had arrived and were starting to get Indians to attend their churches. And pretty soon they were telling them what to do, what to wear, how to live. They wanted men to stop wearing kilts and wear pants, and that women should wear long dresses that covered them up. One Sunday, that clown showed up. She was wearing a big black hat, just like the white man, and a black jacket, just like the white man, and run-down shoes like some white man had thrown away, and nothing else. Well, the preacher, he just about had a fit. Here was a woman walking into his church more naked than not, and what was worse was the people were looking at her respectfully. He ranted and raved and then came down from the pulpit and grabbed hold of her to throw her out on her bum. The people ripped him apart. You do not put hands on a clown. She talked the people down from the violence, talking of empathy and understanding for the white man who didn't know, and then left the church. The rest of the people got up and walked out behind her and left that preacher all alone. That church is still there today, and it is still empty. So this excerpt shows us the important and revered positions clowns had historically, and also an indication of what their role was to remind us to not take ourselves too seriously, to speak truth of the situation. So through early history, the clown was present at sacred and religious ceremonies. They would be there satirizing the priest and disrupting rituals. Or with the Pueblo sacred clowns, here they served as the ritual police during ceremonies, ensuring people attended and obeyed all the rules during the ritual periods. So the clown's presence was welcomed and celebrated as it invited tolerance and helped us to resist collective urges towards hierarchy, homogeneity, and perfection. So as society shifted their foundations from spiritual to political, the impacts of clowns expanded to critique and ridicule temporal power. So for a long time, the clown, fool, and jester maintained this function as a counterweight to authority. There are some famous examples of fool and king relationships, which include Roland the Farter, who was a court jester for King Henry II. He could jump, fart, and whistle all at the same time, but it wasn't just about humorous antics. King Philip VI jester was the only one who was brave enough to tell him of a massive defeat his army had suffered. Okay, here's another one for the chat. Let's all create our own jester name. Create your own jester and full name. How do you do that? Well, you're going to start with your name, or you can make one up, or a nickname you have. You're going to add a ridiculous title, something bizarre like the flatulent or the unhinged or the squirrel whisperer. And then you're going to give us, come up with a silly superpower. So here's some for inspiration. Some geese at will. Turn invisible only when no one is looking. Balance 17. Orly. Go for it. Anyone got some there? We've got Orange Julius Caesar. Great. Bossy Bees, Shirley Sirius, Sheridan Shiny Ears, Eric the Hoser. I wonder what Eric the Hoser does. Let's hear a few of the superpowers you've got out there as well. Pippi the Prankster. Hey. Soon Magoos. I love that. It's good to have some alliteration and rhyming. Mindy Candy can read and redirect thoughts. Ooh, great. Hormonal hippie here. Uh-huh. Stomps on hoses, of course, yes. Insane Jane Bobane's superpowers occupying the spaces between spaces. Oh my goodness. Laurie the Joy Master. Tony Shifalo the La Banana. Fish rise up like birds. Amazing. Moonstare appears and disappears in the cycles. So Chon Woo Woo can make people fluctuate on command. Great. That's a great superpower. Great. Brilliant. A nice little interlude. Yeah. Skippy the Magnificent stole a name and can turn gold into beach sand. Celebrate the banal. Wonderful. Sadie who can't think of anything. Amazing. Yeah. Can never think of anything. Wonderful. Uneasy feelings at night. I've got a few of those. Great. There you are. You're all very inspiring jesters, ready now with a name and a superpower, something to live up to. Okay. Well, here we go. It's sort of I don't often enjoy hearing my voice for long periods of time, but here we are. We're doing a lecture, so we're going to carry on. But please keep popping these wonderful jester names into our chat. Okay, we're going to move on. Oh, unexpected slide. Anyway, let's the chicken will help me catch up. So where are we in our history? Yeah, the clowns were clowns and fools, fools and jesters are in our courts alongside kings. But from about 1444, the clowns are gradually ousted from courts and spiritual houses. The church had become increasingly concerned with its image as a secular and religious power and was fearful of mockery. But now the clowns were free and unsupervised to take their commentary to the streets. It was the Renaissance which heralded a new energy in the arts. And as the connection between clowns and the religious state eroded, a new identity emerged, shifting the clown's position forever. We now have the professional artist. They became itinerant street performers from the Commedia dell'arte troupes, but now they were conquering the courts of Europe through brokered financial contracts with patrons. They were financially viable. They were free agents, answerable only. By the 18th century, theatre for the masses had begun to appear, as well as the need for professionalism and the economic necessities such as profit and market sustainability. And so popular entertainment was born. So we have new economic drivers, and the clown moves away from political commentary. And there are now only a few examples in the 19th and 20th century of clowning with a satirical or political edge continues to exist somewhat in Eastern Europe. One example is Vladimir Durov, who was an iconic figure of the Russian circus. He was described as a clown satirist whose anarchic stance against the autocratic Tsar and his government helped bring about the Soviet Revolution. Vladimir Durov performed with his pig in Berlin in 1907. Vladimir Durov is his name. And here's an excerpt of what happened. Durov placed a German officer's cap, or helm, as it was called, in the circus ring, and his trained pig ran to retrieve it. Using ventriloquism, Durov made the pig appear to be saying, Ich will Helm, meaning I want the helmet. But the phrase could also be translated as I am Wilhelm, thereby equating Germany's Emperor Wilhelm II with a trained pig. The audience understood the pun at once and applauded it. The German police understood it too, and Durov was arrested. The pig escaped without prosecution. Any of this starting to sound familiar? Or the leaders, priests, institutions who really don't like mockery. Feel very uncomfortable with that. Good point to remember. So there's another example of political clowning which appears on screen with Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. And this was made in 1940, and it portrays Chaplin's anti-fascist stance. And when he first proposed making it in 1937, he met huge resistance in Great Britain and in America, who had not entered the war at that point. But Chaplin understood the danger that Hitler presented, as well as the US policy of isolationism. His film ultimately was made, and this highlighted the use of film as propaganda and emphasized the use of clown characters in that frame as well. But the role of clown as political commentator has largely disappeared, perhaps because we've developed other forms to commentate and critique, such as political cartoons, satirical television programs, or stand-up comedians. But outside these recognized performance frames, we have other examples. Meet Circa, the clandestine insurgent or rebel clown army. They were a form of non-violent political activism. The clown army, as they were known, arrived alongside protesters in 2004. They were dressed, as you can see, in flamboyant combinations of army fatigues, brightly colored clothes, and incongruous objects, and using the unique power and position of the clown as a tactic against issues such as globalization and war. The clown army's arrival, using the clown appearance and clown techniques, radically transformed public space and the binary structures of the non-violent direct action movement. Circa captured activists' imaginations because it offered individuals and groups exciting and innovative ways to behave differently in protests. They initially focused on the G8 summits in Gleneagles in Scotland and later in Heiligendamm, Germany. And then rebel clown gaggles, as they call, sprouted up all over the world and began to use the practice for local protests. For example, there's the rebel clowns in San Diego formed the Border Patrol to counteract and parody the Minutemen patrols along the US-Mexican border. And in Finland, you have the Loljas of Odin, who worked against racist anti-migrant citizen patrols. And Circa has certainly inspired my research and thinking, and it manifested in the creation of these clop clowns here for the UN climate conference, COP26 in Glasgow. And again, they came out for the Kill the Bill protests in Bristol a year later. Oh, so that's my grandma. Sorry. I don't know how that got in there. Right. So Circa draws on the notion of carnival, which was found in the theories of a Russian literary theorist called Mikhail Bakhtin. Bakhtin wrote about the medieval European carnival that preceded Lent in the Christian calendar, in which mask-wearing mobs partied, drank, blasphemed, and broke every rule in all of those strict societies for just a few days. It was also characterized by an inversion of hierarchical relationships, where the low mocked the high, a fool was crowned king for a day, and there was no distinction between participants and spectators. Bakhtin writes that the carnival is not a spectacle to be seen by the people. They live in it, and everyone participates because its very idea embraces all people. While the carnival lasts, there's no life outside it. During carnival time, life is subject only to its laws and the laws of its own freedom. And Bakhtin believed that this joyous, outrageously humorous demonstration had the potential for rebellion. In fact, carnivalesque forms of resistance were a key tactic in the global anti-capitalist mass actions of the 1990s, particularly this one called Reclaim the Streets. These were wild street parties, mass gatherings, and road openings that combined art, creativity, music, and celebration. And they were a form of prefigurative politics. Instead of just saying no to roads, which is what they were protesting against, activists would reflect the world in which they wanted to create. And this is a brilliant example of trickster energy. This stilt walker here in this massive skirt. And beneath her skirts were people with jackhammers who were digging into the motorway and planting trees. So this prefigurative politics again was saying, no, we don't want roads. We do want, let's have trees and forests instead. But we're looking at two different types of carnival here. We have the Bakhtin's feudal carnival is tied to harvest and religious schedules, where the world turned upside down, and iconography, coded mockery of the church and state, but which is all ideologically ambivalent and allowed by the state. And then we have the carnivalesque protests or tactical carnivals of the 21st century, which can be ideologically complicated, drawing together and borrowing from multiple movements and yet specific in their social critiques. Well, this therefore creates a narrower appeal, and there's a clear performer and spectator divide rather than the all-in community carnival of the feudal times. But bridging both of these different types of carnival, though, is the clown and the fool, a central character. And historically, and now their presence has served this fundamental social function to heal and critique through disruption. Another key function of bringing the clown into protest spaces for Circa was to reappropriate the docile body, to inject values as seen as distinct from the political realm, those of joy, desire, and diversity. The pleasures of the body have been banished from the public spheres of politics, and the excitement of the erotic pushed to the narrow private confines of the sexual realm. But carnival brings the body back into the public space, not the perfect, smooth bodies that promote consumption on billboards and magazines, not the manipulated plastic bodies of MTV and party political broadcasts, but the warm flesh of blood and guts, organs and orifices. During the carnival, the body with its pleasures and desires can be seen everywhere, luxuriating in its freedom and inverting the everyday. Taken from notes from everywhere. So yes, why clown? I mean, I hope you can already see that the case for clowns and clowning in public spaces becomes very compelling. And since 2018, I've been researching and experimenting with this meeting point of clowning and activism. I have seen some successes some failures, some limitations, and many possibilities as I continue to explore what clowns are being called to do in a world facing multiple crises, from climate crisis to violent authoritarianism, and in a time when our protest landscapes are in flux. So I will leave this lecture part of this session with a couple of quotes for wisdom, inspiration, and provocation. As much as clowns destroy stage conventions and resist social conventions, the audience, for its part, is invited by direct duress to consent in the rebellion, join it, celebrate its utopian goals, and speak out against injustice and the oppression after the play ends. So yeah, a big part of the clown is its relationship to audience, to spectator, to invite those people in. So to invite them into our rebellion. So a clown is this bridge worker, boundary worker that steps between the play and the audience and invites people in. So that's a real space where the clown has enormous power. And this one's for Sheridan. Joy doesn't betray, but it sustains activism. And when you face politics that aspires to make you fearful, alienated, and isolated, joy is a fine act of insurrection. From Rebecca Solnit, Hope in the Dark. And we will be sharing all the resources to get you going on your clown journey with us. So yeah, if someone was asking, is this a history lesson? Yeah, today's one is a history lesson. We are looking at a history and context of political clowning. And as we said at the beginning, we have 3 more weeks, including next week's tools and tactics of the activist clown, which I've started to allude to in this chat, and some case studies of people already working in this area, and a chance in the 4th week to meet your activist clown. So, any questions?
Lovely. Thank you, Robyn. Yeah, folks, if you don't mind, raise your hand. It's just easier to get co-participation that way, and then you can unmute yourself. There you go. Hi, Natalie. So let me pull this up. There we go. You're unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was it was very nice to hear because I think a lot of what we're doing is fighting against something, and I think that clowning really introduces what we're fighting for and can engage people in a completely different way. My question is, you had said that there were successful ways that people had used clowning. And I just wondered what were, starting, I guess, what was not successful and then what was a successful thing? The guy with the pig, that seemed very, successful. Are there things that you could tell us to avoid or, things that have come up that could impact negatively? If that makes sense.
Sure, I can. Yeah, some examples from Circa. That movement lasted about 2 years, and I think it had huge amounts of successes. And the initial one was confusion because authority didn't know what to do with a bunch of clowns who were not there in opposition, but there to help. So yeah, we're here to help. What are you creating a line? We'll help you create a line. So what a clown does is it confuses rather than confronts. And for forces that they only know how to meet force with force. Here comes a force that's, a bit more wibbly and wobbly. And so what it did for a good deal of time was to confuse and wrong foot authority.
I want to say I really appreciate the the directive that, and the notion that the clown is there to confuse rather than confront. And it's a really, really important point, because everything that Indivisible is doing is strategic nonviolent action. And the way that we're presenting activist clowning to you is that it is strategic nonviolent action. So it's planned, it's got a purpose, you have a goal, you carry it out, you reevaluate, you do it again. That's really what I'm wanting to present here. It fits right in with the age-old strategic nonviolent action.
But just as like a quick note, maybe if you've got one on how to interact, like bringing a sense of play and inclusivity to a movement that feels very high stakes and high tension.
These spaces are very, very heightened, very emotional, and we often come in support, but because of how we look, we can appear to be mocking that, And so, yeah, my Amrita Dalival, also in LA, she said, who are you centering when the clowns come? And it's about being really sensitive. And that's why we'll talk about it, but this liminal space is the best place for the clowns, being on the edges, the sort of conduit between like the emotion and intensity of a big protest space and the passerby and the person who's coming by and what's this, I think there's a really interesting space there where the clown can do a bit of outreach work and communicate what's going on and interpret. But yes, it's definitely, when these things are really serious, it can feel that the clowns are not taking it seriously. And that's just a line we have to dance across. But great question.
It's another aspect of the activist clowning that I feel like is part of de-escalation. We're working a particular line of helping to de-escalate while also drawing attention to what is just stupid and bad for the country.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, this is an extremely wonderful class, and you both are doing awesome. The trickster energy is very high right now, and they're talking about joy. For our No Kings, instead of a military parade, we had a millinery parade where everybody wore a funny hat. How does one operate if you are a single clown in a big crowd?
Yeah, and there are I have a wonderful clown, Officer Azulai, who worked solo for 4 or 5 years, who's just bringing people in now. But I think a clear thing that you do for her was to give hearts out at demonstrations and connect beating hearts and be there and listening. So I think and I've seen it, offering free hugs or offering a thing. What's your thing that you can do and do it very well. I think you can work as a loner, but you can make friends in your lone wolf style with this work because it's deeply connecting. The clowns connect, will always seek connection.
I want to say I totally understand that lone wolf thing. And in the classic training for strategic nonviolent action, you always go in pairs. So see if you could pair with maybe at least one person.
At another COP, and one of these climate action conferences, the police just came in and started to beat up protesters, and a group of clowns just popped themselves in the middle, just ran in and put themselves between the police and the protesters. And it was enough of a disruption, a confusing moment for the police that allowed those protesters to get away and get out of there. So yeah, it sounds like a similar thing. It's like using, this image of the clown can be very disruptive in itself. And if it can, we've got some brave warriors out there who can use it and see and understand the dynamics of a protest space and what's happening, and when they can do that and with keeping themselves safe as well. Like, great.
Also, I do want to point out to folks, to the extent that you would be placing yourself in a situation to potentially take blows for any reason. Strategic nonviolent action, again, historically, is that you go and you get trained with your peeps on literally having them smack you and you don't react. Like the civil rights protesters at the Woolworths counter sit-ins, that kind of a thing. They trained for a year pushing each other. You know, you have your marshals that their job is to help you go through that and not react. And so when they actually sat at the counters and people came along and poured soda on their heads and whatnot and shoved them, they just sat there very steely faced. And in some of the pictures, you can see the women were crying, but they were not reacting. So I want to say, yeah, boy, I would sign up for that. And you have to get training on inserting yourself where violence is predicted or likely.
And to say that's not everyone's space. Like I know
Yeah.
we have warriors out there that will do that.
It's very nice to get people's questions in, and thanks for waiting. I'm going to get you unmuted, and you might have to click unmute from your side a couple times, David. There you go. You're
Yes, thanks so much. This has been great. I'm actually a good friend of Vermin Supreme, and I know him from my activism against the Seabrook nuclear plant in the late 70s and in 1980. In 1980, my affinity group was clowns in the blockade, and the National Guardsman who was pushing me out of the way said to me, "My heart's not in it." And that was a wonderful experience I had.
as he's shoving you. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Isn't this world absurd, you know? And the clowns kind of highlight that absurdity. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? A question? It's 6 after. I'm really excited that we've gotten through the material and people have had a chance to ask questions. So this will be the format each week, and we hope to see.
Okay, thank you. I have Parkinson's and I'm 77 years old. I also have arthritis. I'm not going to be going out in the streets, Bonnie, I don't think. But I am interested in this approach and I think it's very creative. I think I'm concerned about using humor as mockery of people. We want to make sure we respect people, even people who don't deserve respect in some ways. It's one thing to make fun of a silly idea, another thing to make fun of a person. I think one of the things we do wrong and as people who care about the world is to make fun of Trump because he has small hands or orange skin or whatever, or to make fun of Trump at all when he's a narcissist that wounds him and makes him behave worse. I think we need to remember that, as the Quakers say, love thy neighbor, no exceptions.
Beautiful, thank you. And that also brings up a good point politically, let me just say, because as a person who has studied how can we build a stable winning majority, we have to not, it would be helpful to not shame the people who voted for Donald Trump, who maybe now have buyer's remorse. My interest is how do we welcome them back into the fold, make them feel welcome, or how did we welcome them for the first time? Right. So right now, you may or may not know there are actually more unaffiliated voters than there are either Democrat or Republican. Thank you. I want you to know I'm going to cry less because you showed up. Seriously, feeling like we're all in this together, caring and crying and walking and talking and sleeping and trying to stay sane helps me. So yeah. So thank you, everybody.
A little invitation wherever you are to raise your hands above your head and bring down the curtain on this wonderful session, bringing it down, down, down all together. And as the curtain goes down, we take a bow. And because we bow, there's a massive round of applause. Thank you all so much for attending. I look forward to meeting you in future weeks. And yeah. Thanks, Sheridan, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thanks, everybody.